and welcome back for Unit 3 in Real Estate Finance. And today we're going to talk about additional government influence. So, when we go through this unit, you are going to start hearing some terms that we have talked about previously. And you're also going to start noticing that in the course, one unit builds upon the other. So, even though some of it seems very repetitive, it is there like that for a purpose. So let's just kind of dive right in, and we're going to talk about the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. Okay, and that's what everybody thinks of it as, like HUD. And HUD sometimes has some negative connotation when you hear is, oh, it's HUD housing. Well, that's not really the case, and we're going to kind of talk about some things like that. One of the big things is HUD is a governmental agency that was created in the mid-1960s to help homeowners and future homeowners. So, but they have a lot of authority that is afforded to them. One is that they supervise the Federal Housing Administration, which is FHA. Notice the FHA loan, okay? Then they also direct Ginnie Mae. Remember Ginnie Mae from Unit 1 was is listed on, it's a secondary market, okay? Then you have that they enforce the Fair Housing Act. That is part of the Civil Rights Agreement that happened in 1964, so that is important. Then we have one thing that when people talk about HUD, they usually think they're talking about the Section 8 housing. Well, Section 8 housing is no longer called Section 8 because that contained a negative connotation. And so the federal government wanted people to understand that getting help is not necessarily a negative thing. So they changed it on one point to get rid of that negative connotation of Section 8, but also because they included other programs. So now you have the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So one of the programs that they added to that is something that the VA actually offers, and it's a VA disability, but it allows some help for rental down payments. It allows help for rental assistance. When you are a disabled vet, or when you have disability in general, then you can use, now it's called the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Additionally, the Department of HUD is also in charge of the Indian Housing Act. Now, we don't really think about that a lot when we're in Texas because we have a handful, like 3 Indian reservations in Texas. There may be more than 3, but I only know of 3. And so we don't really have a lot of working in Texas with the Indian Housing Act. However, you may have that in other states that are more Indian predominant, Native American predominant with the Indian tribes. And so this Indian Housing Act works to help them with their housing. And then they supervise public housing projects. Now, this is the other thing that when people talk about, oh, it's HUD housing, it's really a public housing project that is just kind of underfunded or, secondary funded by HUD. So a public housing project is usually like income assistance, low income housing. We see apartment complexes that are, maybe they're senior driven, but they're senior low income, or they're just, income assistance. We have these in Central Texas. They're in every major metropolitan area, and even a lot of small towns. Lampasas, it's a town of 65. Well, now it's got 7,300, but it was a town of 6,500, and it has a public housing project which is income based. So those things are they have oversight by HUD. So then we have, HUD has goals. Their biggest goal, they call them strategic frameworks, and in here it goes, these are their goals through 2026, so then they'll come up with different ones. But one of the strategic goals of HUD has always been promoting home ownership. That's always been their goal. Trying to educate and financially help people to where they can become home ownership. The American dream is not to be a renter forever. The American dream is to own your own part of America. So they are tasked with doing that. One of the biggest things that we just talked about was fair housing. Fair housing is something that will be on your exam for the state. It'll be on your exam for this class. It'll be on your exam in a lot of your real estate classes, because fair housing is integral to what we are doing. We as real estate agents cannot, neither can lenders, cannot discriminate against anyone based on the protected classes. Now, these are protected. Fair Housing Act is Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. But it's all encompassing together, okay? So it prohibits discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of property, period, just property. They say dwellings, but actually it's any kind of property, based on race, color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, and disability. These have been our cornerstone of everything we do in real estate, that we cannot steer people. You'll hear that in one of your other real estate classes, to different areas based on that. You cannot redline. You'll hear about that. That's a mortgage term where we can't say, I'm not going to lend to you in this certain area. So we really, and I will tell you, the Fair Housing Act, there has been a lot of talk lately because it talks about sex, and it's talking about a person's sex, okay? So when we have people who are not subscribing to male female and we have alternates, that has opened up some court cases that have not really been settled. There's a couple of court cases that say, okay, sex is now sexual origin, but it's not. I mean, it's just hasn't happened yet. So additionally, familial status is a very neutral term. We like that because it talks about it's not familial status. It's not whether you're married, it's not whether you're single, it's divorced or widowed. You cannot discriminate based on familial status. Familial status also includes kids. So other than some very small exclusions, you cannot, discriminate based on those things. One of the things that people get confused about is they think that the military is a protected class. The military is not a protected class. That is your job. And so it is not a protected class under the Fair Housing Act. A lot of times we will have people in real estate saying, well, I'm military. And I'm like, I appreciate your service, but I cannot, we can't discriminate. So what that means is, and let me tell you how that looks. When you have someone who is military and they want to put their property in property management and they want to rent it out, and they say, I only want to rent it to military people. We can't do that. You can't, it's not a protected class. It's not, I can't discriminate. It's kind of a weird thing. You can't, because I would have to discriminate against other people who are not military. So we can't do that. So fair housing, though, is something that you are going to come into a lot. It is every day in real estate. We have a fair housing symbol that we put on our documents and put on our things because we promote fair housing. And we promote fair housing for everyone. That's our goal. So, um, in that, there's a lot of, HUD also has a lot of programs. They have community revitalization, neighborhood stabilization, a lot of things that you will see elsewhere. But one of the things that's kind of impacting Central Texas right now is this interstate land sales. So the interstate land sales deals with marketing land to potential buyers. So it's supposed to reduce fraud, and so the current law requires, if you are going to develop a subdivision of 100 more lots, then you have to file with HUD a statement of approval, a statement of record, and it includes explanations and descriptions of existing and proposed encumbrances, which means, things that are on the land, improvements, utilities, schools, recreation areas, roads, all of those things to be provided for the residents' use. So usually that is part of the contract package. When, we always say this is the theory and then we're going to apply it in real day life. So usually that's part of the contract package, but anyone can go into like Yow Ranch in Killeen, or you can go into, and you can ask for this and they'd have to be able to provide that for you. Now, there are exceptions, because there's exceptions to everything. Exceptions to this rule include subdivisions of 5 acres or more, if you have cemetery land, commercial, industrial, and any residential subdivision marketed exclusively in the state where it's listed. So, how does this look? Let's talk about D.R. Horton. D.R. Horton is a nationwide builder. So, their website is not specific to Texas. Their website is specific to D.R. Horton, which is nationwide. So when they develop a land, when they develop something, if they are the developer, now that is key. Just being a builder is not being a developer, but if they are the developer, then they have to disclose that they're going to build all this stuff. And they disclose it anyway, even though they're not the developer. In your text bed, it goes through public housing. It goes through the housing choice program, Native American housing. It goes through those little programs, okay? And we've had, and then it goes into federal legislation. So in Texas, the Texas Real Estate Commission is a regulatory body, meaning the rules of the Texas Real Estate Commission are set forth by the state legislature. We are a regulatory business. So legislation nationwide, locally, statewide, impacts us. The financial crisis that happened in 2008, which had to do with predatory lending, we now had the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. So when Dodd-Frank came through, lending world went crazy because it talked about how you relate to clients and what you can disclose and what you cannot disclose. So then that led us into the CFPB. Remember the CFPB from last chapter? We're back again. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's Title 9 or Title 10 of the Dodd-Frank Act. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau came out of that Dodd-Frank Act because what we talked about, it was for the protection of the consumer. So a couple of things now that we talked about last chapter, your TILA, RESPA, integrated disclosure, your TRID. And I said last time that the loan estimate is due to the borrower within 3 business days from the application. Now, let's talk about that. So, someone can go online and they can fill out an application to get pre-qualified. That's not a loan estimate. Finding out how much you can qualify for is not the same thing as the actual application for a loan. A loan application cannot be complete without a property. So, someone would start their application and someone would find out, hey, this is how much I can qualify for. But an application is not complete until you have the property address. They have to have that contract. Okay? Once they have that contract, then they can go in and provide that loan estimate within 3 business days from the time they get that completed application. Then we talked about the closing disclosure again in Unit 2. And once again, I told you the closing disclosure must be provided to the consumer at least 3 business days before closing. Now, there is a little bit of give on that, as long as the closing disclosure and the loan estimate match. If there are significant changes, and significant changes are usually more than is 1% of the loan. So if there are significant changes, then there has to be another 3-day waiting period. And in here is changes to the APR greater than 1/8%, changes to the loan product, or the addition of a prepayment penalty, which most loans don't have a prepayment penalty unless you get into like adjustable rate mortgages or things like that. Another thing they did is they had mortgage servicer rules. Remember, we talked about mortgage servicers are on the secondary market. Okay, it's going to be very important for you to understand who is primary, who is first in the first market, and who's on the secondary market. But it told them like some of the rules that they had to follow. And I like this book that's been updated because it talked about the in April 2020 that they had an interpretive rule. Gotta love interpretive rules. But that had to do with COVID-19 pandemic guidance and how that looked when we went to closings. Then you have the Real Estate Settlement RESPA. Okay, we just talked about TILA RESPA, which is the Truth in Lending Act, and the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. Well, now we just have RESPA. Now, what RESPA really has been designed for is it covers the sale of residential properties and the acquisition of loans. So that's kind of where it has to do. But it also includes like home equity loans, home equity line of credits, second mortgages, if you refinance, all of those things. But it's only residential properties. This is not commercial lending. Okay, it's residential properties. Now, one thing that is so funny. So in real estate, you cannot receive a kickback. I call them kickbacks. You cannot receive a kickback for referring business to another real estate service provider. Meaning, not referral fees between agents, but if I pair up with a lender and I say, okay, I'm going to give you all of my business if you give me a referral fee. And they're the lender, or they're the title company, or they're the home warranty company. If I am getting a kickback, I am in violation of RESPA. So in the book, it talks about real estate brokers or agents are prohibited from receiving anything of value for referring business to another real estate service provider, or from splitting fees received for settlement services unless the fee is paid for an actual service. Of course, there's always exemptions. But what that means is, before we get into the exemptions, how it looks in real estate, and it's kind of relaxed a little bit since it first came on board. When it first came on board, when this RESPA rule first came out, and the CFPB was making this big thing about it, basically, we had title companies who would say, hey, we're going to rent a bus and we're going to head to Dallas and go to a Dallas Cowboys game, or we're going to spend all day, or I'm going to buy you some extravagant gift. And sometimes mortgage lenders did that because they were trying to earn your business, like buy your business. First of all, that is not how this world works, okay? And people who try to do that, you don't want to do business with them anyway. You want to do business with people who are going to support your vision for your clients and who are out for the best interest of their clients, not in the best interest of themselves. If you've gone through contracts class, I'm sure you talked about the information about brokerage services, and it's one of the 4 points, putting their interest above your own, okay? So that's what RESPA did. It put a penalty to putting your own interest aligned over your client. Now they have some exemptions. And just like in everything in the world, it's how you spin it. So exemptions to these restrictions are if you have promotional or educational activities. So if I'm wanting to promote a title company, or if I'm having the title company give us a class, the title company can give a class, but then also provide me lunch at the same time, okay? Payment for goods provided or services performed, and affiliated business arrangements. Let's talk about affiliated business arrangements. There are companies that they have a real estate brokerage. They also have ownership in a home warranty company. They have ownership in a title company. They have ownership in a mortgage company. Most of these are corporate brands, right? Corporate real estate companies. But they have that whole package. Well, as long as they disclose that these are affiliated business arrangements, as long as they have the same owner, then they can do it, which is kind of weird. It's always been a little weird for me. And I came from corporate real estate world, that, you know, you would be required to use these people. And so you really want to always keep in your mind, I want to use the people who are best for my client. That is a thing. When you're talking lenders, you don't just have one lender. You have multiple lenders. You have multiple people who want to do what is best for your clients. And so you can give them that. I keep hitting the wrong mouse. Talks about disclosures, truth in lending, and then the Federal Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which is basically means when you apply for something, they're going to give you your credit score. Home mortgage disclosure, community investment. Okay, local, state, and ag lending programs. So let's talk USDA. Agricultural lending can be wrapped up into USDA, but it can also deal with crops. Okay, if you are going to be if you want to do farm and ranch, you really need to make sure that you are completely up to date on all of your agricultural lending products and all of the products that the land banks have, whether it's a VA or whether it's a conventional, any kind, or a USDA, any kind of agricultural lending that's available, you want to look at it. And there are several different strategies and companies that do it. But there's kind of thing that we talked about, Farmer Mac. Okay, if you see Farmer Mac, it has to do with ag, right? Not residential housing. Okay, because so we have Ginnie Mae and Freddie Mae and Fannie Mae, and now we have Farmer Mac. Okay, so they're fun. But anyway, so just know, if you are going to, I always tell people, you have to align yourself with people who are going to enhance your business. Clients look to you to know about everything. They think that, we always have to stay in our lane, but we still need to know what's going on in both of these other lanes, right? So We need to know about the USDA program. We need to know people who work within that. Not everyone, remember, one of the things of Texas real estate is that you have geographic competence and that your broker allows you to work in certain areas of real estate. So if your niche is going to be farm and ranch, and that is something that you love and something that you want to be involved in, start forming your alliances. And alliance is not the right word, but start forming your maybe it is alliance with people in that industry now, because you need to have a resource list of people who will help you. The amount of times that I get called within a given year saying, hey, who's a good land lender? Hey, who can do a land loan for under 5 acres? Hey, I've got a VA person and they want to buy this and this and this. Who's a good lender for that? So you need to have those resources built in. So I hope you guys have enjoyed Unit 3. Unit 4 is going to be all about the secondary mortgage market. So it should be a pretty interesting time. We'll see you for Unit 4. Take care.